Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Writing Life. I'm Stephen W. Long, and you know, I've said this before, and I'll say it again because it just pleases me to no end, and that is our little community is so supportive of arts in general, and my prejudice, I guess, is writing. And my guest today is really one of the people who make this work in McMinnville. My guest is Barbara Drake. Barbara is a professor emeritus from Linfield, and you have been, you're past president of the Arts Alliance of Yamhill County.
Right.
And you also really are the motivation, the inspiration for the Terroir Creative Writing Festival. So, so far so good?
Yeah, I of course I couldn't do that by myself, but I was on the board, and I thought there was so much going on with visual arts, which is great. I love that too, but I thought we needed something for literature, and I had Lisa Whiteman was on the board too, and she was very interested in that, and was a big help from the beginning, and had lots of ideas, and still is working on it. And Emily Chadwick was on it. There were other people who haven't worked on it since then, but were very important in getting together and getting this started. So,
and Barbara, we've got lots of ground to cover, but you know, this, because of a recent event, I just wanted to mention this and maybe have you comment. And I think probably because of your connection, a couple of years ago, we were fortunate to have Ursula Le Guin as our keynote speaker.
It was longer ago than that.
Was
it was our very first Terroir Festival.
Oh my gosh, so
and,
8 years.
So that was, this will be our 9th year, so that's how long ago it was.
Okay, gee, it seemed.
Yeah, and Ursula had been a friend of mine, has been a friend of mine for many years, and we're in a writing group. I'm really missing her, so I'm speaking of her in the present because I still feel like she's there. It's just hard to imagine that she's not, but she was happy to come down to be our keynote speaker this year, and it naturally attracted a lot of people. And boy, we're all going to miss her, and we're thinking about adding a recognition of her work for the Terroir next year. We don't have time to do that this year, but we hope to dedicate the festival next year to Ursula and have a session on her work. So
I think that would be wonderful.
She was so important to so many people, and I feel very close to her, but as soon as you talk to people and see everything, you know she really belongs to the world. Well, so many people were so moved by her, and
I heard some commentary on NPR, and people would come from really all around the world to see her. So anyway, I felt very privileged, and thank you for that connection. And
time goes by quickly, doesn't it?
Well, I thought it was just a couple of years, and it was 8 years ago. And then I just wanted, we're sort of on the subject, you were able to get Jean Auld to be a keynote.
Right,
And
I had met her, but I didn't know her
in the same way.
You know, intimately. Or
okay.
Anyway, that was good. And the year Ursula came, Molly Glass also came. And she's published at least a couple more books since then.
Now, is she coming back?
No, but I thought that she knew Ursula very well too, and so I think of her in that connection, and maybe we can get her to come and do something, and or the rest of the people in our poetry
and she has
group.
In the past, right? Molly Glass has.
She was there that first year also.
Okay, has it been that long, really?
Yeah, and Carolyn Le Guin, Ursula's daughter, is a writer too, a poet, and a number of other people that
I think I heard her on the radio.
Around. Yeah, could be. Oh, that was Elizabeth Hurst's sister. That was on NPR, I think.
Okay, all right, so you heard that.
I might be wrong. Maybe they both were, but I heard Elizabeth.
And it's coincidental, I think, if we don't keep these straight, it's a little bit easy to confuse Terroir, the Terroir Creative Writing Festival, which again you were instrumental in, and the Paper Gardens Writing Contest.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about Paper Gardens, the history, where that came from?
Yeah, Paper Gardens started a lot longer ago, 25 years ago. I think
Right.
this is the 25th year. And it was started by Rachel Burchard. Now, I'm not sure who else might have been involved in starting it, but I think it was pretty much
Okay.
her idea. I think she contributed money for putting the book and all that, and so was behind it all that time. And I actually judged the contest way back when. I wouldn't say it was the first year. I just don't remember, but early
Okay.
on. And I knew Rachel, and she was very devoted to writing her own writing and to creating a what I call a literary density in the county, having more people writing and reading and supporting the literary arts. And I think that's what is behind the terroir, too. I'm sure this has happened with Paper Gardens, too, but besides judging it, I haven't administered that at all. But in terroir, I know that since we started it, I have become aware of, or else they have moved here, or more people are involved, but we have many more writers that I know about, including yourself. When we started it, it was not,
Yeah.
I know we couldn't really find that many local writers.
Well, I have said on other occasions, the tricky part of a show like this is inventory, is supply. Can we find enough people with, and it's not just writers, but
Right.
Anybody related. So we've talked to editors and songwriters and so forth. But really, the focus is fiction and nonfiction prose, and they just keep showing up.
Right,
And so,
and that's great.
yeah, whether it's coincidental, maybe that, but I think when you have something like Paper Gardens and something like Terroir, that sure doesn't hurt.
Yeah, well, I know that.
The wine doesn't hurt either. but
Yeah, the
that's probably-
wine is good, and just the beauty of the whole place.
You bet.
But I came to Linfield in 1983.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I was hired was to develop a creative writing program. And there were other people that would write, but not professional writers, except scholarly writing and so on.
Okay, sure.
And so they had just passed a creative writing major, but they didn't yet have a curriculum. And so when I was hired, I was to develop the curriculum and what classes we would have and so on.
Okay.
And we slowly built it up and had more majors and
Yeah.
more people involved. And it's very hard to get more faculty because every department is looking for more faculty all the time. But gradually we added
Sure.
people. And although I'm retired, I feel very attached to Linfield and also involved with the college, not very actively, but just checking out what's going on. And they have a really good group of writers there now, a lot more than when we started.
I know a couple of them, and I just think they're marvelous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really great.
So, a couple of things. I really want to talk about your writing too, but just let me preface that by saying, when you came to Linfield, did you have a similar position elsewhere? Was this
I was at Michigan State,
okay?
and I was in a department that was primarily aimed at composition, and I taught English comp classes that was called Women in America. So it was a mixture of women's studies and writing,
Okay,
and
but not
and
poetry.
literature. No, but I did start there before while my children were very young. I have my 3 children. I had a job for a publisher writing high school textbooks.
Really?
Yeah, and so I did work on writing, and then I worked as a writer in the schools there. So I did work teaching creative writing in schools, and it was like
Okay.
could be anybody from K through 12, but it was a public program. So I did a lot of creative writing then. Then I got this job teaching women's studies because I had done some work in that and some writing in that. So I had this notebook of creative writing exercise that I developed for doing the Writers in the Schools. I don't know if people know what Writers in the Schools is, but it's usually a public supported program to introduce creative writing into schools because teachers have their hands full, and it's to bring in writers and...
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. It's in Oregon too. I don't know how active it is right now. It probably is, and I'm just not involved with it here. But in Michigan, it was very active, and so I would go out for a day or two or three to Detroit or Grand Rapids or somewhere and work with the teachers to introduce creative writing into the curriculum at all ages.
Isn't it interesting, in a sense, you were in training
Yeah.
for your later, your later job?
It was, you know, sponsored by the National Endowment
Yeah,
for the Arts.
yeah.
And so during those years, I built up a notebook of things I developed for that. And so at one point, while I was teaching the women's studies, an editor came to the college, to the University of Michigan State where I was, and they were looking for somebody who had an idea for a college creative writing text.
Okay.
So when he saw my notebook, he asked me to submit a proposal, and so I did that. And so in 1983, the first edition of my book, Writing Poetry, came out. And I was still at Michigan State.
Okay.
No, I came to Linfield that year. I was working on it back there, but then it came out the year I came to Linfield. And then it came out another edition and so on. So, I've been involved with teaching creative writing or literature, whatever, from a number of different angles, from high school textbooks to college textbooks to teaching at different schools. I was a visiting writer at Whitman one year. I was at Lewis and Clark two different years while I was still at Michigan State and so on.
Yeah.
So just kind of a, gypsy writer until I settled down at Linfield.
So I'm going to tell viewers this because I've already told you on many occasions. But you are probably my favorite poet, and you're certainly at the top there. And your memoir, your prose, reminds me of James Herriot.
Thank you.
All creatures.
I love James Herriot.
Well, and you've written about your life on your farm here and so on.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this, and I want to use the right word. And your poetry is so approachable or accessible. I guess that would be the thing. But I don't want to sell it short with that word. And so let me explain. When I read your book, your collection, Driving 100, every time I turned the page, I would read the poem and think, "Oh yeah, I felt like that.
That's good to hear.
I know what you're saying." Or I had, in some way, I could relate, some sort of an experience that I could relate. So I just love your work, and
I think if we in our art we go deep into our feelings and insights, we find other people there too, or other people
some
find
commonality.
us. Yeah.
So I suspect you know Ted Kooser.
Yeah.
Ted Kooser's work, and you remind me, you guys.
Well, that's a compliment. That's a nice compliment.
Yeah, I just think he's terrific.
Yeah.
And again, it's something. On the one hand, you can really get your hands on it, but there's always something deeper too. Sometimes there's a little bit of a twist, not a twist at the end, but you have. And it's like gathering information. And here he's painting a picture, and then at the end you see what that's all about, what you were leading up to.
Oh, you're my favorite critic.
Well, I may have said this before, but my primary writing teacher was Elizabeth George, and she said that at least in a mystery, the ending should seem both a surprise and inevitable.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
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 So, well, let's go on. Now, you're going to judge this year's poetry portion of Paper Gardens.
Right.
And we kind of talked about the categories, and people can look this up. It's real easy to go to the website and check it out. But do you recall the 4 categories?
Yeah, they are, I believe, like traditional, and traditional would mean using some form such as a sonnet or
Okay.
something else. Speaking of Ursula, I just was reading a poem of hers and I thought it felt a little like free verse, but it rhymed, and I looked at it and I realized that she was using a form which I can't remember, but it was like A, B, A, B, and then I think it was BBA
Yeah.
or something like that.
Right, yeah.
So there are forms that are
Sure.
really fun, and you can even make them up. They could be formal. You know,
Okay.
if you said you were going to write a poem in two-line stanzas, and each stanza would have its own rhyme or something like that.
Sure.
That would be a form too. You don't have to write a traditional form, except I would consider. I mean, for the traditional category, you would,
Right.
but there are more options than
Okay.
than you might think, and you might. There's just about any way that you can use rhyme and line breaks and stanzas, basically, to say what you're going to say. And
Okay.
it's not easy because some of the best formal or traditional poetry, you read it and you don't even realize it's in a form.
I have done that.
Yeah,
And-
Robert
and-
Frost, sometimes you think, oh, and then you realize it's
Yeah.
a form.
Sometimes the rhyme is subtle enough.
You're right,
that it's not sing-song. Maybe that's the way to say it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got traditional.
Traditional, haiku, free verse. Free verse can be a problem because it's not prose. I don't mean a problem. It can, but people writing free verse can't just write prose and break the lines
Right.
and say it's a poem. They can say it, free world.
But they would be wrong.
But well, it's really open, but they need to think about the rhythms of natural speech, I should
Okay.
say, like Walt Whitman or like the Bible or something is free verse, basically. But it has cadence and rhythm and imagery that gets your attention and makes you feel something, because often poetry is expressing something that you really can't say in any other way.
Right.
And people interpret it and say what it means and so on, but it's never the same as the poem itself.
Okay.
And then the other category, I think, is poems of place.
Yeah. And I believe in the past the place needed to be here.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's good. So I hope that's all true.
Yeah.
I have to check.
And again, folks, if you just check it out, look at AAYC or Arts Alliance of Yamhill County.
And there'll be an entry form,
yeah,
and it'll have all the information. But the deadline is March 1st.
to enter,
Pardon?
to the entry date.
Yeah, to
And I
enter.
think-
And then the event is May 3rd.
Okay.
I hope that's right.
Yeah. Well,
And
again, we
it's
can-
at the Chehalem Cultural Center, which is exciting. I don't know if it's been there before. It's
I don't
used to-
think so.
No, I think
At least
it's the
I've
first
not
time.
been there.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be in the big ballroom area. So,
So I feel like this is an opportunity. I'm going to capture you for a minute. We have a mutual friend, Susan Parker, and I had her in a critique class.
yeah,
And she one time told us it was a quote about poetry. And the gist of it is, you don't have to understand it for it to be terrific. And I really wish I could find that. I'd like to tack it up somewhere. Do you know that quote?
no, I don't know, but I've said it myself sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not that you never understand it, but that I believe that often people, when they first read a poem, or when I first read a poem, I can really love it, but not get everything out of it that I will
Right.
get with familiarity. And so it can be, mysterious, but the words are beautiful and
magical, yeah.
fascinating, and they conjure an emotion in you because words do that. They give you emotions. I think of one that I read when I was, well, all my life, really. I have read poetry. And, you know, you start with when you're a real little kid and you read Alice in Wonderland and you read the Jabberwocky and you have these strange words and
Right.
you just can tell it's something really scary going on and how fun it is to get into that. Or you read, you know, I think of when I was a teenager reading Lorca translations, and the emotions were very strange. Like green, green, I want you green. I always think of that when I was young. That was like, oh, that's so interesting, you know. And he tells this story about a bandit character and being pursued and so on. It's really fun. So I like that idea that you don't have to know what is called the meaning, because the meaning is in the ideas, images, emotions that are created by the work.
Yeah.
But you can also study it and get a lot of fun out of learning more about it, background, analyzing it. So I would say start with that feeling, but don't leave it there. Keep going.
I think, I wish Susan was here we could have a little talk about that. But I think, to me, her poetry was sort of the opposite of yours in that sense that my standard critique for her was, I really like this. I don't get it, but I really like it. And I feel like that I get yours, the imagery, and it seems so grounded that I
that's
can really
good.
relate.
But I would say that probably I try to make a clear kind of story or something, but there are other layers that I hope people would find out.
Sure.
You know, I hope people would read it more than once and think about.
So this is a great segue because you're going to judge the poetry.
Yeah.
And I don't think you should write for somebody or like to please somebody
Right.
in the sense of fulfilling criteria. Having said that, and maybe more as a teaching tool, what are you going to be looking for?
Well, in the first place, and I read them more than once, I
Right.
should say, I would look for that thing that you were talking about, like, oh, that got my attention, whether I understood it or not.
Okay.
And then I would read it some more and see if I'd missed anything or misunderstood it or whatever. But it depends on the age level. You know, there is an age division in the entries.
Right.
There are children and adults, and I don't remember how they're divided up exactly. But when you're looking at a very young child's poem, a lot of times they will write about pets or something, and they'll say, you know, I have a bunny, he's very funny. And then they'll say, you know, his name is Fuzzy and whatever. You know, so they are mainly reacting to rhyme. They love rhyme.
Sure.
And that can be very cute and nice. As they get a little older, I would expect them to exhibit a sense of a little longer line, a little more sense of rhythm that's not just conk, conk, conk. And thinking about metaphor, you know. My bunny was round like a football or whatever would be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And so on. And then you get to things that are either story poems or very musical poems or things that could be songs or free verse or whatever. And if you are doing haiku, I think you need to be aware of the tradition of haiku. And I would assume that teachers...
and everybody knows this probably, but it's very formalized. It's very structured.
Right. You would look, to call it haiku, you'd probably look for close to the, stresses in the lines.
Okay.
Or syllables in the lines. and so on. So there's that. Now, at some point, I think a lot of people, well, I should say, as they grow up, they may not get past the fuzzy bunny stage, but I would think when they're older they should, to have
Okay.
a little more complex ideas and
Sure.
a sense of a rhythm. And rhythm doesn't mean necessarily a regular rhythm. It just means sense of how the language sounds when you speak it, and so on. And some originality, and not just trying to sound like poems that you have heard. Taking personal subjects that are
Right.
important to you, so something that feels genuine and doesn't feel like you've seen it a million times, which is hard because,
Yeah.
People have been around writing poetry for a long time. And inevitably, we all come back to the same subjects of love, death, nature, but there are different ways to say things.
As you were saying that, I was trying to think, I don't know that other than exposure, I don't know how you teach that.
Well, by example, I guess,
Yeah,
but you can.
but
I use exercises sometimes with people. Like, here's one to get people to think in figurative language. Take something like your hand. Look at your hand and write 20 metaphors or similes for your hand. My hand is like, or my hand is, and 20, believe me, is past most people. You can do maybe 5, and then all of a sudden you're struggling. So it kind of forces your brain to go a little crazy, and you come up with things you wouldn't have imagined that will be very interesting.
I
If you say.
may have said this on other shows, but we were talking about Ursula Le Guin, and I guess I'll bring this out whenever I get the chance, and that is, you may remember, when she gave the keynote speech, she said the teachers should, when the kids come back to school, instead of saying, "What did you do on your summer vacation?" she would say, "Write about what you didn't do on your summer vacation."
That's good.
and because then it opens up everything. Well, I didn't go to Mars. Well, write about. Well, I didn't ride a dinosaur. And in a sense, I think that's what you're talking about with what's new and fresh and different,
Right.
and not tried before.
You push yourself beyond what
Right.
just came easily,
Right.
and then there's something else happens.
Yeah.
I love that. There's so many quotes from Ursula, and I didn't remember that one, but it's good. People
Yeah.
keep bringing them out, remembering things that
Right.
she said that were good. I loved being in a group with her, and she had such a wonderful background in languages and in Latin and classical languages too.
Oh.
So if we were discussing a poem, she could always bring up all the background of a word. I mean, poetry groups are like that. Some people, I think, couldn't stand them because you can start talking in the group about one word and say, no, that's not the right word, and
Right.
so on. But she was always good at bringing up the distinction between one word and another because of its origin, so that you
Oh, I'm jealous.
knew that,
Yeah.
that's the right word. That other one's not quite right.
It's not a mistake, but I got suckered into going to bookstores over this last weekend, and which I just love. And of course, then I come out with armloads of books.
You're right.
And one of them that I didn't buy, but was very intriguing, was literary tattoos. And
Really? I don't know if I'd want that on my bookshelf, but I might want to look at it and return it to the library.
this had, and I'm going to not do a good job here because I can't remember the words, but they were both Greek, and they were the words, or they were the etymological origins of nostalgia. Our word nostalgia, which is really 2 words, and it means return and pain.
Return and what?
Pain.
Pain, really?
Yeah, and it's the pain it's the pain of the longing, and of course I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
morphed over time. But I just thought, yeah, that's
Nostalgia or something like that.
pretty good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I like to know that too. I took Latin in high school, and I've always been grateful that I had 2 years of Latin
Yeah.
from my Latin teacher whose name was Eulalia Titus, which I thought was a perfect Latin teacher's name.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wondered if she adopted that name or not, but
My Latin teacher's name, and I don't even know her first name, but it was Miss Dick,
Miss Dick,
or Mrs. Dick.
huh?
And she was just so petite, just very tiny little woman. And of course, to a 14-year-old, she was ancient and had steel gray hair and just very, you know, I think, is it a page boy? Is that the name of
Oh,
it?
yeah.
Very close
Well, it
crop.
sounds like she was a good Latin teacher.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah, my Latin teacher I thought was ancient too, and had gray hair that was little tiny
Right.
curls, but she was very devoted to Latin,
Yeah,
and I've
right.
always been grateful for that.
yeah. Well, I love language. I love having you here. We're out of time, but would you do it again sometime?
Sure,
Okay.
anytime.
And I look forward to.
Well, it's really good to see you again. I haven't seen you for a while,
been a while.
and I know you're always writing and reading and
Yeah.
living
Yes.
that good life.
Wouldn't it? Living the dream.
Yeah.
No, I just what's better than reading and writing?
Right, right.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Folks, thanks so much for watching. This is The Writing Life. I'm Stephen W. Long. I would love to hear from you. You can contact me through my website, stephenwlong.com. These eventually get shown on YouTube if you just can't get enough.
Oh.
And we'll just see you next time. Thanks so much.
What do you think? We done?
I don't know, you guys wanna do one
Yeah,
just
I
with
think
yourself
as
without
long
me
as
doing
they
the
think we're
markers?
done, if
No,
they got
no.
enough, they got enough.
They got enough? Probably, okay, sounds good.
Let's go lunch. I'm
Oh.
hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could use a bite too.